Good morning, everyone, and it's great to see all of you here this morning. It's a full house. So my name is Councillor Asghar Khan. I will be chairing today's meeting, Strategy and Resources meeting, and as usual, we are broadcast live on Leeds City Council YouTube channel, and anyone watching through YouTube channel, I would like to welcome them as well. And before I move into the main agenda, I would like to wish those who are in attendance and also who are watching to YouTube channel happy Ramzan Mubarak. Today we are focusing on finance and HR matters. We have an item on the 24-25 budget to support our regular monitoring of the in-year budget position. And this will follow by a review of workforce equality, diversity, inclusion policies, and further linked to report from the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, setting out their views and progress made on Speak Up within the Council. I would like to move to the formal business now, and I would like to invite the attendees to introduce themselves, and also I will ask the guests to introduce themselves also. So I will start from my left, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Eleanor Thompson from Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Morning, everyone. Andy Parnham, Councillor for Armley.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Moortown, Meanwood Ward.
Good morning, Craig Timmins, Councillor for Carvley and Farsley.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Tom Hinchcliffe, Bramley and Stanley.
Morning, everybody. John Ebo, Human Resources Head, responsibility for equality, diversity and inclusion. I'll be presenting that paper later.
Good morning, everyone. Maisie Roberts, and I'm the I'm the outgoing chair of the Disability and Wellbeing Network.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Leahy. I am acting vice chair to the Disability and Wellbeing Network. I also support all the different staff networks in my role in HR.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lydia Anchin and I'm chair of the Women's Voice Staff Network.
Morning, Kat Handy, steering group of the LGBT Staff Network.
Good morning, I'm Kat Denver, she, her. I'm a senior project manager in the council and I'm the chair of the LGBT Staff Network.
Morning, everyone. Hayley Lloyd Henry, she, her, principal legal officer and the co-chair of the Race Equality Staff Network.
Good morning, my name is Carol Gentles. I'm a Principal Programme Manager in Health and Housing and I co-chair the Race Equality Staff Network with Hayley.
Morning, everyone. My name's Louise Sanderson and I'm the head of the Business Administration Service. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead there, didn't I? Shall I continue?
No, go ahead, yeah.
Apologies. Bit of nerves. So yes, I'm head of Business Administration Service and I'm also the co-chair of the Super Families Network, which is part of the Carers Network. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Sam Bennett. I'm here as a part of the Career Advancement Staff Network Group.
Morning, everyone. My name's Helen Saunders. I do the mental health first aid training for Leeds City Council and I'm also the co-chair of the Healthy Mind Staff Network.
Morning, everybody. My name's Lindsay Harvey. I work in Adults and Health in the Organisational Workforce Development team and I'm also a co-chair of the Healthy Minds Network with Helen.
Morning, I'm Victoria Bradshaw. I'm the Interim Assistant Chief Exec for Finance, Traded and Resources. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Andy Dobbin. I'm the other Interim Assistant Chief Exec with responsibility for People, Digital and Change.
Good morning, Mariana Pexton, Director of Strategy and Resources.
Morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Deborah Cooper. I'm the Exec Board Member for Resources and Deputy Leader at Leeds City Council.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Vanessa Wellham, Freedom to Speak Up Guardian for Leeds City Council.
Good morning, Councillor Ryan Stevenson from the Harewood Ward.
Morning, Councillor Winkage, you're representing Morley South.
Good morning, Councillor David Blackburn from Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Chapman from Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, Billy Flynn, Councillor for Adnam Wharfdale Ward.
Good morning, Becky Atherton, Scrutiny Advisor.
Morning, everyone. I'm Rob Clayton. I'm Scrutiny Advisor to this board.
Thank you for the introduction. And can I ask the guest speakers and also the board members, when you're speaking, can you speak a bit louder and pull the mic closer to you so some members up this end of the room cannot hear you? Moving on to agenda then, can I ask Rob to go through the 5 items of the business, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, just the formal items of business that we consider each time. Agenda item 1 is appeals against refusal of inspection of documents, and there are no appeals, Chair. Item 2 is exclusion of the press and the public, and there are no matters that fall under that category, Chair. Item 3 is late items, and there are no late items of business today. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and I will just briefly pause to let any elected members declare any. I will take silence as none. And then item 5 is apologies, Chair, and we have apologies from Councillor Andrew Carter with Councillor Ryan Stevenson attending as a substitute. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob, and welcome, Councillor Stevenson, to our scrutiny board. Thank you. And item 6 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 13th of January 2025, and it's on page 7 of the agenda pack. Do member accept these minutes are true and correct record? Yep, thank you. So, are there any matters rising? So what I'll do is I'll go page by page, so if any members got any matter rising, they can raise there as well. So page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, and page 12, page 13, and finally page 14. Thank you. Rob, do you have any matters that you need to report back to the board? Yeah.
Yes, just one in relation to minute 65, Chair, which was a request for information around bad debt provision, which I'm currently pursuing, so I will share that with members as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, we will now move on to agenda item 7, page 15 of the agenda pack, which looks at the latest year financial performance in 2024 to 25, which the Exec Board considered on the 12th of February. Victoria, over to you to introduce the report and the presentation you have kindly prepared for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the financial health monitoring as at December month 9. So we're going to cover the in-year position, the budget action plans, the HRA, dedicated schools grant and the collection fund, just to give an overall position of where we currently are. So in the in-year position, as at the position that was reported to February Executive Board, we were reporting a 6.8 million overspend. That is reduced from where we were when we reported month 7. However, as we've been saying throughout the year, as we get close to the year end, we will be using reserves and one-off measures to bring that position into a balanced point. What we would say is that we are still seeing pressures in adults and children's, and the adults position is 14.2 million overspend. Now, this is mainly around the social care budgets, which is both the working age adults and the older people's, where we are seeing demand and complexity of that provision increasing. And as I said, we've been reporting that through the year. Children's and families have increased their overspend slightly by £500,000, so they're now reporting 21 million overspend. And again, it's the same position as we've been reporting around external residential placements, the cost of those, and also the complexity of the children that are presenting themselves. We're also experiencing high numbers of children having education, health and care plans, and therefore the associated transport provision with that. And then we've got some further overspends in the semi-independent living, and also the number of independent foster carers. The other areas are not out of the norm in City Dev. It's around the planning income, which is less than we'd projected, but that can move quite significantly if you get a couple of big planning applications through. So we are forecasting that we won't achieve the income levels that we expected in that area this financial year, but we might see, as those planning applications coming into the new year, increasing. CH&E is reporting a balanced position, although like all these, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. There'll be ups and downs within that position. And then Strategy and Resources is seeing a 3.7 million overspend, which is mainly around the civic enterprise Leeds area, so the Leeds building services and the fleet. The fleet, again, is the implications of having the demand on that resource. So I've gone through those main areas around that. On the budget action plans, these are the savings requirement. We had a 63.9 million of savings. On top of that, to mitigate some of those pressures that we've shown, we had identified further savings of 15.9, meaning that we had 79.8 million of savings to be delivered in that year. We've actually delivered 69.5, and the shortfall in those savings is shown in that overspend position by directorates. A lot of these savings are delayed rather than not being delivered, and will be delivered in the early part of 25-26 financial year. The housing revenue account is showing a balanced position, and that position has been where we've been throughout the year. Where we are seeing a significant overspending is in the dedicated schools grant, and this is the first year that we've seen an overspend in that area. It is mainly around the high needs block, which I think nationally all local authorities are grappling with this area, and again around the education, health and care plans and the number of children requiring those plans and that support. The statutory override is something that we are monitoring very closely, because that comes to the end at the end of the financial year 26. But government is well aware of the impact that would have if the statutory override was lifted, and therefore we're working hard with them around what we can do to alleviate some of that pressure. On the collection fund, we are maintaining collection rates both on council tax and business rates. Council tax is slightly behind where we were this time last year, about 0.77% down, but because of the cost of living crisis that everybody is experiencing, we are doing everything we can do around the collection of that area. And then business rates is slightly down as well by 0.97%. But again, we're working with businesses around collecting that income. So that's a quick overview of where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Before I open to the board members for comments or questions, Councillor Cooper says no. Okay, that's fine. So, any comments or questions, board members, to Victoria? Nope. Victoria, will the reserve be used to balance the remaining 6.8 million, or might this come from the measures we have introduced?
So the main part will be through the Strategic Contingency Reserve, which we set up for this purpose. That will cover the 6.9 million overspend. Obviously, that will have an impact on next financial year, which is when we set the budget last week. We did put a provision in around increasing that Strategic Contingency Reserve of 10 million, so that we'd got some contingency for next year as we see the demand increases. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Just a comment, Asgar, not, and it's not for Victoria really, it's my old one, I'm afraid. I just wonder if, looking at children and families who have overspent by, or will have overspent by 76 million over the last 3 years and are looking to save £38 million last year, well, there's an awful lot of point in us looking at this each month, because to me it just doesn't make sense. We don't have children and families here, they don't come to these meetings. Victoria's got to answer for them, which I don't think is very fair. So that's it, don't require a response, but thanks very much.
Yeah, do you want to come back, Victoria?
Yeah, I would just say that there's a lot of work going on in children's and families and adults and health. There is a sufficiency strategy that we're working on at the moment with the service around making sure that there is provision within the city for the children that we have and the right provision. As I've said previously, it does take time to set up that provision because of all the different legislation, which is quite right, to make sure that our children are safely looked after. And all authorities are experiencing this level of pressure. We're not unique in Leeds, but there is a lot of work with action plans, etc., to deliver those savings that's required. We also did put a lot in the budget for next year for adults and children's. We put 49 million in for 25-26, reflecting that pressure, and therefore the savings that we are proposing to make are based on being able to safely reduce that provision down. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, if I can just add for everybody else's clarity, and I know Councillor Flynn's well aware of this, but just for anybody watching or anybody else in the room, I have to say that this is not the only scrutiny board, the council, that looks at these matters. And indeed, there is a Children and Family Scrutiny Board which looks at the performance and delivery of children's and family services. So they will be looking at that. This particular board is to deal with the corporate side of things, which and today in this report it's purely around finances. But the other scrutiny board do get to look at performance and finance throughout the year of the Children and Family Service.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Victoria, just finally on 25-26, what impacts will use of the reserves have on the next financial year, if any?
So the use of the reserves in this financial year means that they won't be available for next year, and that's why during the budget that was set at Budget Council last week, we recognised that there were still pressures in adults and children's, and therefore we set up the social care reserve and also a general contingency of the 10 million. So we put that aside as part of that budget setting process because we knew that the reserves that we were carrying forward from this financial year wouldn't be available. Okay, thank you.
Before I close this agenda item, any board members got any burning questions or comments? No? Nope. Thank you, Victoria. And following the budget meeting last week, can I also thank you and your financial team for all the hard work and for your support Scrutiny Board through the budget consultation process. The members' recommendation on page 15 of the agenda pack, are you happy to approve? Yep, thank you. Thank you. So we can now move on to item 8, page 71 of the pack, which is a report on the workforce EDI. And can I welcome John and his colleagues from HR and our staff networks, chairs to the meeting. If you would like to, well, you've done an introduction now already. So please I will hand over to John to go through the presentation, through the report as well. John, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Rob and I discussed briefly before the board the best way to approach is, given you've got quite a large room. So what I will do is scan through the paper and take you through the key themes. And you've got presentations from colleagues on each individual network. There's quite a few of us. So just learning from last time, we went through quite a bit of time. So there isn't a formal presentation from me in that sense, but you've got the paper, and I'll walk you through the key themes. So I guess to kick off, thank Scrutiny Board for their continued interest in this area. You have shown real interest in check and challenge since we started this journey. So thank you for that. Our approach is always based on our vision for the city. Whilst we're a workforce kind of input and focus, we base all our work on the best city ambition around reducing poverty and inequality. That's the formal background for all of our work. So that's where we kick off, really. It's a collaborative approach. You can see from the room. I'm not sure whether Scrutiny has been ever this full. That this is done in collaboration with colleagues who work on staff networks, and I always say they kind of hold our feet to the coal, but they are part of the organisation, and we work on that check and challenge, working together with them. So this is a kind of a retrospective overview over the last 12 months of the work of the Workforce CDI pillars or themes in the organisation, and the paper kind of walks you through some key elements. But I'll just pull out some, I suppose, useful things for discussion and consideration later on. So we are a complex organisation, we know that, and that sometimes that does affect how effective we can be in delivering EDI across 14,000 colleagues. So that's a constant challenge for us on how we embed consistency of approach, given how large and complex we are. There is also the point about maintaining momentum through all the work that we're doing across the organisation. And we began this journey in 2022, I guess, more formally, although we always work on values in the organisation. So the EDI team was formed in 2022, and the work plan was birthed around that time. So the first thing we want to do is probably about right to do a refresh, because we're 3 years into that journey now, and we've delivered a number of things, including the 5-step program we shared with you last time we were here. So that's one key thing to share with you, a refresh of the EDI work. We'll also look at how we work with our staff networks to have a bit of a quick review on our approach. And we've got a day plan in the diary for April the 4th to do that and maybe see how we can work better across the way. Since we were last year, we've been finalists in the Yorkshire Excellence in HR Awards for our EDI work in the region. I think that's notable and worth mentioning to you as a board. And that gives us some reassurance about the external view of how we're seen and the work we're doing in our organisation. So on to the main themes and also the context of change, actually, which I think is worth mentioning since we were last here. Obviously, we've had interim CEO in Mariana. We've had a new CEO in Ed who started with us recently. And those transitional leadership arrangements in the organisation have not changed the way in which we embed EDI. And Ed has already been out and met the staff network chairs and having a one-to-one with them separately as per each individual staff network, a real listening exercise for him to grasp where we are. Again, a more of an independent view. And Ed has also already shared with the organisation his own kind of approach on EDI and I suppose set the leadership stall out in terms of what he expects to see from managers and colleagues. I think that's really useful. It's probably worth mentioning in the past 12 months, the impact of geopolitical events affecting our communities has, unsurprisingly, impacted the workplace as well. And one of the key challenges we've had is ensuring how do we maintain our duty of care to staff through that difficult period, whilst navigating what is actually complex and sometimes divisive global terrain out of our control as an organisation, without always having the necessary answers. But that does not mean we don't care for our colleagues. We do. In terms of what we've done since the last 12 months or so, on training, for example, we've launched a new training for all staff. The last time we were here, we shared what we've done with our 3,000 plus managers around this space. And quite rightly, we were faced with a challenge from the board about what about the rest of the staff. So we launched a new EDI training for all staff. All staff now have access to EDI training in the organization. We've launched and are delivering a training on reasonable adjustments, really important in the organization for managers to understand how we better do that with colleagues and work with colleagues to understand their needs within the organization. We've launched and are delivering inclusive recruitment and selection training. Whilst there's a freeze on recruitment, I note Victoria's presentation, we are not recruiting, but where we are going to recruit to make sure that that is done properly in an inclusive way. So we're training people to do that. We've also launched something called the Positive Action Framework, which is a framework to encourage our managers to really make the right decision to make sure we are an inclusive organization, to make improvements to representation, as an example. And that includes a webinar that we launched that's recorded for managers to use. There's a manager guidance, as well as a very simple and instructive animation. On progression, the last time we were here, we talked briefly about the Aspiring Leaders Program. Feels only yesterday, but that ends in July. And our cohorts are ongoing, doing really well on that program at the minute. We are reviewing that at every phase, every step. And we intend to deliver 2 new cohorts based on that review once we finish cohort 1, which will allow us to take this progression opportunity to other grades in the organization and support them around leadership and inclusive leadership and growth in the organization. Around data and monitoring, you may see a mixed picture from the data set in the report. In the sense that if you compare the organization to the Leeds district data in terms of census, whilst we seem to be doing well and overrepresented in terms of female representation, 61% versus 51% in Leeds, ethnically diverse staff and disabled staff seem to appear underrepresented with lower representation figures. We seem on par with the LGBT plus community at about 4%. And we seem okay in terms of carers. I think the first thing we need to think about is make sure the data is as accurate as can be. So we've launched a campaign around data declaration, the new system that we just brought into organization called myself service. When you go into that system, the first thing you see is a video encouraging you to declare your data. So that will make sure that data is more robust and that we can gather more and colleagues trust us with that data. So that's probably important, but I'll come to what we can do around increasing representation later on. On speaking up in zero tolerance, really a key priority we mentioned before is around how we embed the recommendations from the grievance practice review. We have had some attempts at this, we've tried different things, and it's fair to say we need to do more on how we bring through those recommendations from that report, because there are a number of things that I'd like to do around that, particularly around early intervention work. How do we get in there quickly and to kind of nip stuff in the bud before it becomes a formal situation? We are exploring how we do that better. We did last year release a refresh of the zero tolerance statement, making it very clear to the organization where we stand on that, including a rewrite, working with the leader and the chief exec. And that was published and recirculated last year. On recruitment and selection, we aim to bring in anonymous shortlisting in the next few months as part of a new system that will allow us to have a more, I suppose, less biased way of working in terms of recruitment when we come to recruit. And again, we're developing support for ensuring our panels when we recruit are diverse. We have guidelines already in existence, but we're working through what is the mechanic to make sure that happens. How do we know people are doing that? There's been a steady increase in requests for colleagues to join panels who are diverse. I'm saying that anecdotally, but we need to do more in terms of providing a pool, for example, where people can choose from. So I've counted through quite a lot. So let me just wrap up in terms of next steps and the key things we need to do. So we need to refresh the EDI plan, and we're doing that. And that will go to executive board in late summer. because there's been some changes in the organisation. Are we still fit for purpose? Are those things we're doing still relevant? Are we missing anything? I've mentioned staff networks, kind of a way there to refresh our approach our staff networks, the grievance practice review recommendations, and also how we connect better to directorate EDI boards. Every director has an EDI board, but there's work to be done to connect them better to the 5 themes. The last time we were here, we were at step 4 of the EDI program. Step 5 was getting directorates together to sort of celebrate, but also question themselves on key learning they've had since we started the EDI journey. And there's enough information in the report around step 5. Quite heartening in terms of what we've done in step 5. We are already planning step 5 for this year because we are committed to having an annual step 5 program to allow directorates to go back and check back on what they're doing against their EDI objectives. So quite a lot to do. 2 new cohorts of ALP that we're launching, alongside a full program of ongoing Be Your Best training, delivery on reasonable adjustments, on positive action, on staff EDI. We're still continuing the manager mandatory EDI, that's a fixed item, and inclusive recruitment. We're exploring, in view of what's happening globally, we are exploring delivery of anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim training to our staff in becoming a more inclusive organization, and all without an operational budget. I think I'll stop there and invite any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for your comprehensive report. And at this stage, I will open to board for any comments or questions. Yeah, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got quite a few bits on this. I'll try to be as concise as possible. Thank you for putting this report together, and thank you for all the work for the people involved in the staff networks. I think the importance of EDI in our organisation is so important, and it can't be underestimated, particularly with what you spoke about in terms of the geopolitical situation and people using diversity and inclusion as a convenient football to kick around and blaming it for all manner of things that it's absolutely not related to. In terms of staff networks, so it was inspiring to read the work that's being done. It was good to see our own clerk mentioned as being the chair of one of the networks. So, yeah, thank you for that. The good thing about the staff networks is it gives a platform and it brings things to the table. But at times as well, it can also, bring forward things that might sound a little bit uncomfortable to listen to. And I think it's important that we act on them. The Race Equality Network and Dawn, so Disability and Wellbeing Network in particular, highlighted some clear steers and recommendations based on the lived experience of employees. This also relates back to what the Stand-Up Guardian also mentioned in the report, and also towards the figures that you gave and that's in the report in terms of underrepresentation of these groups as well. So I was going to ask what was the plan for senior leadership to meet with all these groups, which you've answered, but just to say it's important that we look at each of these recommendations and have a proper plan from senior leadership moving forward. Secondly, there are some themes running throughout all of them, and I'm just going to go through them, and this isn't to say this is embedded within the organisation, but actually inconsistencies across directorates. And a few of them are staff not being given time out to attend these staff network meetings, or being viewed less favourably for expressing an interest, reasonable adjustments not being considered always, not having enough diverse and inclusive interview panels, not being interviewed when they meet key competencies, bits to do with grievances which you mentioned, not being successful for a role and there being poor feedback on why they've not got the role. giving feedback is extremely difficult, particularly when it's feedback that, you know, is tough because they've not been successful. But what can we do to make that better? What can we do training-wise in terms of managers so that the people who have been turned in have a clear plan of where they can go next? And the other one that came through was in terms of communications, a lot of Facebook groups, emails, newsletters, but obviously not everyone, you know, has access to IT. So it's how can we, you know, make sure that everyone's got a voice that may not have that access. So I have more, but I think I'll leave it with that.
Thank you, Councillor Timmins. And over to you, John.
There's quite a bit in there. I'll try and pick them up one as quick as I can. In terms of timeout for staff network meetings, we've already agreed this. So CLT, the corporate leadership team, did sign off an approach. Depending on what your role is within the staff network, how much time you're allowed to get involved in staff network activity. So I don't think that's that difficult, other than just kind of restating that message. Yeah. There is clarity from the organisation what you can and can't do. It's because you're making sure work their mind just to make sure they do understand that that is the case, that staff are allowed and enabled to get involved in staff networks because their voice are important. So we can pick that up in terms of our, maybe be your best, mind your community, and reinstate the role of staff networks and the agreed allowed time to do that. I think that's fairly straightforward, really. Your point on reasonable adjustments is well made. This is why we launched the reasonable adjustments training and session and guidance work. We're early days into that. We started it probably just before end of last year, was it? November last year. So that's why we launched that work. And you're right, it is a recurring theme in the reports from staff networks. On diversity and inclusivity on panels. Again, I've mentioned the work we're trying to do on that. I think there's a real momentum now and appetite to do that. What we need to ensure we do is provide support to managers to do that. And I'm always kind of two thoughts on that, because I want them to own that accountability of that role. If you always do it for them, it doesn't get embedded, because you go to HR to solve the issue. So it's a kind of a bit of a carrot and a stick. Make sure we have that structure to support them as and when they need it. But actually, my first port of call is, look in your services, look around you, and when we say diversity, actually, it's in its broadest sense. I'm not saying a panel has to be one black person, one yellow person, one blue person. If you all think the same way, you get the same results. It's about diversity of thought, and really check and challenge your appointment process. And you can do that by looking wider, but we will put in place a structure to get it going, so we don't have this shortage or reason to say, well, I can't find somebody to on my panel, so I can't do it. So we are working on that. And again, your point on grievances is well made. It does come out in terms of what that we need to do more around early resolution, and I think I've touched on that. And the point around poor feedback, we're a big organisation, and you get good examples and you get poor examples. And what we need to do is amplify the good examples and work with those who are not doing it well to make sure we give proper feedback. And then on the IT, the last piece, there's a lot of work we've done on IT recently. Andy may want to pick that up. So we've become a more digitally enabled organisation, and we've done really good work around the core business transformation piece that will enable a much larger proportion of our colleagues to have access to digital information in a really simple way. Andy, want to pick on that?
Yes, thank you very much, John. Yeah, just to specifically answer your point about communication, particularly to around 5,000 staff we have at the moment who don't have a digital identity with us, so they don't have an LCC device or an email account. So obviously communication and access to that population has been historically a big challenge for us, so you're right to raise it. However, only this month, actually started last month, we're now beginning to roll out the new My Self-Service as part of the core business transformation programme. So every member of staff, whatever work you're engaged in across the organisation, will begin to have access to our online systems where they can use for their own devices or devices in the workplace. So they will have access to that communication engagement and also the functionality that everybody else has benefited from. So we're well on that process, and I think we would expect and hope things to improve as a result of that rollout.
Thank you, and can I bring Mariana at this stage?
Yeah, just to add on the point about kind of senior leadership support for staff network chairs. I meet the staff network chairs. It's one of my favourite meetings about every 6 weeks or so to kind of try and listen and work through what those issues are. So it's quite a live conversation. Each director champions a staff network and tries to meet with the chair periodically. So, for example, I work with Rob and the team on career advancement. Trying to think now who meets. James works with Kat, Caroline works with Hayley and Carol, and I won't go through the rest, it's a bit too much of a test, but you know, that active dialogue is in place. And then the broader point about management, we've talked here before about the Be Your Best programme and how we're trying to use that to improve things like general communications and, for example, the ability to give feedback. But that is work in progress. It is a big group of people, and it's not everybody's necessarily immediately got those skills to do it. So just a real strong commitment from us that we will absolutely continue, you know, to push those things through Be Your Best, so that overall the lived experience on EDI gets better over time.
Thank you, Mariana. What we'll do now is, Councillor Timmins, is we'll hear from our staff networks and their input. And board members will be happy to, you know, ask questions, and also John Ebo and Mariana and Andy will be able to answer those as well. So we will. Yeah, you can come back after the staff networks, Councillor Hamilton. Yeah. So it'll be then the other members will be able to input as well at the same time. So can we move on to our staff networks now? Yeah. Healthy Minds Chair, over to you.
Morning everyone. My name's Helen Saunders, as you know, and I'm the co-chair with Lindsay of the Healthy Minds Staff Network. Our network is a peer-to-peer support network for people who are going through mental health issues or people who are supporting people who are going through mental health issues. We have different sessions on twice a month for the whole council to be able to attend. We talk about different subjects to do with your mental health. You know, we had a really good presenter last week who spoke about eating disorders. You know, we've got another one coming up on World Bipolar Day, talking about bipolar and work and how they do it. We've got an active Facebook group, which I think there's about 375 members. We've got a full mailing list of 543, so it gets out. So going back to the point where you was talking about, you know, the frontline service, some of them are managers for the frontline service, so I would expect them to put the newsletter up on the notice board to let everybody to know. We have started a men's talking group in Leeds Building Services, which is led by Simon Jarman, so we called it Simon's Space, and he gets quite a few men going to this space. They've got a little room where nobody can see who's going in or out, and it's, you know, it's become really, really popular. And I've had people coming up to me in other directorates saying, how can we go to Simon's Space? And I've said no, because that's just for LBS. But if you want to set up a Simon's Space in your directorate, then, you know, please feel free and I'll help you as much as I There's also a women's group up there as well that's run by Jessica. It's not as popular as the men's group. So I'm going to give her some help on that, see what we can do about that. What else is there?
Are we on progress?
Go on, you can talk now. Go on, Lindsay.
Thanks, Helen. Sorry, I'll just refer to the slides because obviously we've shared the information as well, things that we've made.
Can I ask you to pull your mic closer to yourself, please?
Sorry, can you hear me better now? Yeah, so in terms of our slide and the things that we've made good progress in this particular year, things that we're proud of, as Helen said, we've introduced some new sessions and we're looking at co-delivering these sessions. So we've heard a lot of good feedback that the sessions that we co-produce with people with lived experience are the ones that have the biggest impact. So we're
Excuse me, I think members are having difficulty hearing you. If you put your mic a little bit down, it should be fine.
Oh, sorry. There. Yes, so the co-produced sessions that we've introduced where we have people with lived experience sharing their real life stories, those are the sessions that we're finding have the most impact and we're very keen to do more of. So as Helen mentioned, we had a person talking about their lived experience of having suffered with an eating disorder for the past 40 years. And they've been a long-standing employee of the council, and they shared very openly their experience of that and their journey, and it was a very, very powerful learning experience as well, we found. So how many people were on that session, can you remember? 118 people joined that session. What we are looking to do, which we don't have the facility to do at the moment, is to record our sessions. So with the person's permission, we'd really like to record these sessions so that they can be shared. Because we do recognise the timings of our sessions might not always be sort of accessible to everybody, especially if they're working on the front line or if they're part-time staff. So that is something that we're looking to address in terms of accessibility and sharing our sessions as recordings, because our sessions are only an hour long, so they're not too lengthy in that sense, and they would be accessible for people at an appropriate time to them if they were recorded. The other thing in terms of one of our challenges, but also a priority for us going forward for 25-26, is what's already been mentioned around the digital divide. So just mentioning there about the accessibility, we are looking, because we've had feedback through basically we did like a little mini survey of all of our members about what they liked and what they'd like to see us do differently. And one of the things was they said they would like to see more sessions in person. Because we sort of reverted to doing things on Teams, post-COVID or during COVID, and that worked really well. But we feel it's now possibly a time where we can look to do connecting with people more in person and do more face-to-face sessions. But obviously that is a challenge for myself and Helen as chairs in terms of the balance in our day jobs as well. But we would really like to see some interaction and connections with people out in various service areas so that we can reach more people, and that is something as a priority for 25-26. I think that's covered everything, and if not, we've got it in our information that we've shared, and please do ask us any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is race equality. I'll hand over it to the chair.
Thank you. I'm just going to start by speaking to the successes, and then I'll hand over to Carol in terms of some of the challenges. We'll weave in the priorities as we go. The first thing that we're making good progress on is our member engagement. So we have a mixture of formal network meetings and sort of informal wellbeing coffee break and chat meetings. In terms of the formal meetings, we have a mixture of sort of sharing key messages, most importantly in relation to all of the EDI initiatives which are coming out of corporate council, opportunities for members to share their own experiences, and we do have some speakers from both inside and outside of the council that come to speak to us. A couple of examples are we had the Leeds Asylum Seeker Support Network coming to speak to us about a trustee opportunity. We've had members of HR talk to us about coming to hear experiences from members so that that can be fed into a recruitment review. And we're shortly due to have somebody come to talk to the network about being the school governor as well. Another success is our ongoing diversity calendar. We have done for quite a time now, ran a series of events throughout the year. Many of them are open to all staff to attend, and we've started to work collaboratively as well with other teams within the council. So this year, for example, we hosted the Refugee Week launch in June 2024 with the migration team. Following on from the far-right riots, we hosted a workforce listening session with the previous Chief Exec, Tom Rawdon. There were over 400 colleagues on the call of that one. And we also, at the moment, are running some sessions around Ramadan with the Equalities team, linked to the Fasting in Solidarity campaign. Something which impacted many of us last year were the far-right riots. It was, quite frankly, a terrifying period for many of our members. But something which has come out of that is we've had a group of mainly white colleagues wanting to take matters forward in terms of building an allies group which is focusing on anti-racist practice, and it's something that we're really excited about. It is in an early stage at the minute, but we have a steering group formed who are going to work alongside myself and Carol to work out the best way of delivering that. As an example, we had Race Equality Week in February, and we invited anybody who was interested in joining to be part of that, and we had over 100 colleagues on the call, so that's a testament to the number of colleagues throughout the organisation who are interested in moving forward with that. Another area where the network's doing well is providing support to individual colleagues who are going through issues within the organisation that they feel are linked to their ethnicity. Carol delivers that in the main. She really leads on that and provides a lot of really invaluable support and focuses on trying to resolve issues early rather than going through the grievous process, ideally, because we know how protracted that can be. And then finally, I just wanted to recognise the Impress development programme. We were fortunate enough to work with some external consultants who delivered a 4-week programme for no cost to 6 of our ethnically diverse members. Myself and Carol were also fortunate to come alongside the chosen 6. It was a great opportunity. They fused some really practical advice around the recruitment process with an opportunity for those members to just have an open and honest discussion about themselves, building confidence, and what sort of resulted was a really empowering experience. So I'll just hand over to Carol for the challenges.
Yeah, so in looking at the challenges, I have to say, first of all, that as a network, we work really, really positively with the organisation. So even though some of what I'm going to say may contradict that, I think we just have to be honest about where we are. We know that there's an underrepresentation of staff within the organisation as compared to the census, and that is compounded as we go to more senior grades. Now, we asked our members some time ago what would speak to you about race equality in the organisation more than anything else, and they actually said senior representation. So it matters to our ethnically diverse staff and communities that people are in senior positions within the organisation. And I myself and Hayley sit on a task and finish group. We've had the conversations about positive action and also what we're going to do. But I think there are some challenges, practical challenges that we need to look at. And one of the reasons that we mentioned feedback in our brief was because progression is such an issue to so many people. I've just had a C3 recruitment in my team, my own team, and the calibre of the applications, the qualifications that a lot of our ethnically diverse staff possess is quite surprising, and they're on B3 and C3 grades. They have degrees, but yet they're not able to progress. So I really want the organisation to look at this. And again, we don't have all the answers, but we're just presenting it as a challenge and one that matters. And following on from that, I think workplace culture, call it workplace culture because I feel that as an organisation, managers and leaders play such a huge role, And I think that there's a lot to be said for just being nice and being kind. I think that impacts everyone, especially if you have a protected characteristic. So I think there's space for managers and leaders just to understand their role. And I think that being kind underpins EDI work. I've said that before. So whether you're looking at being flexible, supporting people to progress, looking at reasonable adjustments, just having that attitude of can do makes a difference. And I would say that alongside conflict resolution is still an issue to a lot of ethnically diverse staff. And finally, the Middle East conflict, it has been mentioned already. I think it was a real challenge for us as network chairs. We had a lot of inquiries, there was a lot of upset, a lot of frustration within ethnically diverse colleagues who didn't feel supported either by their managers, and I think as well the far right uprisings left a lot of people feeling unsafe. And I think the question is, what does an organisation that is striving towards inclusion look like for people in those situations? I think a lot of people felt it. I think a lot of white colleagues felt the impact of the Middle East conflict, but obviously that landed differently to Muslim and Jewish colleagues. And we as a network are clear that we want to be here for all staff that are ethnically diverse, but not everyone felt well represented. So I think there's a conversation. It's a difficult conversation, but it's a necessary conversation that needs to continue if we really want to be truly inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the staff networks are Women's Voice.
Good morning, thank you. So I'm Lydia Anchin and I chair the Women's Voice Staff Network. So I've been in the role for over a year now, and I just want to say how much of a privilege it is, and I really enjoy being the chair for that network. We've had a really good year in terms of maintaining a strong and stable leadership. So the last year has been really about re-establishing the network after a period of about 2 years without a staff network chair. So we've got a really strong steering group which oversee the work of the network, and we also have network ambassadors in each of the directorates who amplify the voice of women in their directorates. And I guess if I was to sum up the work of the network, it's really we offer support to women who experience difficulties around things that impact them in the workplace, and also we help women connect with each other as peer-to-peers and also with senior colleagues within the organisation. In terms of some of our successes and progresses, I think we've been really good at listening and responding to the needs of women in the organisation. So you'll see our network priorities have been informed by women in the organisation in terms of what they need to help them be their best in work. So one of our first priorities around women's life course health and wellbeing. So our ambassadors have really read on this particular priority, and they've set up like drop-in sessions around period and menopause within various locations within the city. We've also been supporting women around fertility and the impact within the workplace. So that's something that came through when we asked women what are the things they need support with. And a lot of that was really around manager understanding around the impact of fertility and the support that they'll need in terms of time off for treatment, and also the awareness that for a lot of women, the fertility journey doesn't end in a positive way. And just being aware of that in terms of colleagues and managers supporting women going through that. Another way we've been doing in listening responding is around women have links to our second priority around career development progression. So women have talked about having more support in terms of access to career development opportunities, particularly for women who work in part-time, who have caring responsibilities, and also ethnically diverse women who've reported about barriers in terms of career progression. So one of the things that we've done as a network is we've set up a mentoring programme. So we've been able to match 18 senior women with 18 junior colleagues in the organisation, and that's been a really good way of connecting women in terms of helping them address some of the issues, particularly around confidence and also around just different challenges that women face. And I think it's good to hear from people who've experienced it, and you can learn from them also. We've also set up some listening and learn sessions. So we've been asking senior women in the organisation to come and talk about their leadership journeys. And that's been a really good way in terms of learning and development for women to understand some of the barriers that women experience in the council. I think you can look at women who've probably more senior in the organisation and not realise actually they face quite a lot of the similar challenges. So it's been a good learning and development opportunity for women within that. We've also set up more work with male allies in the organisation. So we have Lee Hemsworth, who's our senior male allies lead. So we've got a group of about 30 male allies who were keen to engage with the network in terms of our priorities going forward. And we've also been working quite closely with our HR colleagues in terms of informing policy and practice within the organisation. So we were able to feed back as a network on the Dignity at Work policy that's been reviewed recently and a suite of sexual harassment training products. So I think the last year has been really good for the network in terms of establishing itself and its role and how we can support women in the organisation and as well as working with the organisation to bring that together. In terms of what it would be better, I guess, one of the key things a lot of women contact us around is around menopause and support within the workplace, and this is particularly probably more support with managers understanding the impact of menopause within the workplace and understanding some of those reasonable adjustments and how that would work out for individual staff, bearing in mind some of the challenges with managing an overall team. The second thing we'd like to really council against other local authorities and leading companies in relation to gender equality. I think it's really good to see, like at a CLT level, we have a good representation of women at that level. And I guess for us to understand how well we are doing, it's trying to understand a little bit more about the progression and how long it takes women to get to progress through the organisation. And then more progress in terms of making misogyny a hate crime. So that was one of our priorities that we identified last year. And we have been working with the communities team in terms of trying to progress that. So there is a working group that's been set up. So work has started on that, but I feel as a network we feel that's been a little bit slow, but I think progress is being made on that. And in terms of our priorities, they're going to remain the same as for 25-26 as they were for the last year. So it's around women's life course, health and wellbeing, career development and progression, eradicating sexism and misogyny, and benchmarking Leeds City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. You've done it within 5 minutes, so well done. Next one is the LGBT chair.
Good morning, board. I'm going to be slightly disruptive, which is a standard matter of course with me in the council. And actually, thinking on what Councillor Timmins started off with is, I'm going to focus on the challenges, because I think that actually that sets up a really important conversation about how that directly impacts the work we do within the actual network. Particularly the point that John raised in the report and wider, the sort of national, international and global picture in terms of LGBT awareness is quite stark, and we said this at the last board, and it's gotten unbelievably worse in some respects. And I cannot sort of stress enough the impact that directly has on the staff members in the council who talk to us, and also members outside the council who reach into us for services. For example, in the UK, we do not have a ban on conversion therapy. That is still something that has been 9 years, I believe, in the offing, so that hasn't been resolved. The conversations of sort of political contestation and politicisation of LGBT rights on a local, national and international level has obviously ramped up significantly in the last 12 months. For example, in a report published by IGLA, which looks at sort of reports in Europe and Central Asia, of the 54 countries covered in that, only 6 of them reported no hate crimes in those countries over those years. And in the 48 that did, predominantly faced by trans members of staff. Even within West Yorkshire itself, whenever we just look at the sort of closer to home scale about how does this actually impact us, West Yorkshire was had the third highest reported hate crime incidences for sexual orientation and hate crime over the last number of years. So we were behind the Metropolitan Police and Greater Manchester. That speaks to something positive in the sense that people feel comfortable in order to report LGBT-related hate crimes, but the fact that we are still significantly higher than most other authorities sort of speaks to the actual lived experience of staff. And staff do talk to us openly about the hate crimes they experience in our city. This directly impacts those people at work. And related to sort of the context around that as well is that Gallup, which is a charity that focuses on LGBT hate crime, says that actually we believe that it to be about 1 in 8 people who actually only ever report. So if we think of those numbers, the numbers are drastically underreported. The impact that sort of that national and international hostility against LGBT identities means that directly impacts people in the workplace as well, because it emboldens sentiment and conversations within the workplace. So Carol spoke very profoundly about things like kindness in the workplace, and what we find is things are framed as kindness or curiosity when actually they are sort of talking points that actually make staff feel unsafe, and actively that is the word that they are using, unsafe, in our workplace, and that's within this council. That's not words I'm taking from something else. That therefore leads into the second point I made about the challenges we have, which is about the organisational hesitation. Understandably, this has become a bit of a political hot potato over the last few years, and that therefore directly means that people have the level of sort of consistency of confidence, I suppose, in LGBT-related issues, particularly in such a fast-moving environment, has meant that we haven't felt that sort of consistency of experience with other sort of equality characteristics in the council. It does also mean as well that we still face as a network that the majority of work comes to us to be done. For example, LGBT History Month in the council, we had no engagement from any other directorate. The LGBT network led those activities that we led internally to the council. There were external facing events. And like others who have mentioned, the barriers to participation in things like time exists for us. So I'm going to stop being the misery thing, and I'm going to allow Kat to speak about all the nice things actually we do.
So very much.
Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Right. Very much linked to that, one of the major successes over the last year has been the continued hosting of our weekly support spaces, and that allows our members to have that weekly space to share experiences, discuss issues, have some support from similar people around some of this hostility that they've been facing, and discussing some of that wider international and national context. So that's been a real cornerstone of our sort of activity over the last year. We've also conducted a survey of our staff network members, so getting an idea of what they see as our main sort of duties as a network going forward, and they see that as providing a safe and confidential space for LGBT staff and allies to raise issues, that kind of talking space that I've discussed, acting as a critical friend and checking and challenging on the organisation in sort of changes that impact LGBT community, and as again advising the Council on Equality Matters. One of the sort of, I guess, maybe negative aspects of that survey highlighted that over half of respondents answered maybe in terms of do they think the Council delivers on LGBT inclusive space services and spaces effectively. So over half of people say maybe. It's not a strong yes. There's a lot more to be done that's been highlighted by that survey. Other work we've done is producing sort of engagement around visibility days, so content, blogs, to sort of boost that visibility of LGBT identities. We've collaborated with HR and the equality team to put forward another Stonewall Equality Index application, and again in the top 100. So that's our 7th year in a row as a council being there. So it's good, positive stuff, and also involvement in the sort of organisation and events in Leeds Pride. And Leeds Pride is always a sort of major event for the LGBT community in terms of demonstrating that the city is a sort of inclusive space. Going forwards, our sort of key priorities are continuing to deliver on what that survey has highlighted as priorities for members, and that is events, and we'd like to do more collaboration with other staff networks and highlight that sort of intersectionality between identities. They've sort of highlighted the need for additional training and awareness sessions. That is something we'd like to sort of work on, but it's always a resource issue within the network in terms of being that sole sort of place where the awareness training for LGBT issues comes from. It's very sort of resource heavy, and we'd like more support on that from the sort of HR equality side of the organisation. Continuing the critical friend role, continuing the visibility days, so LGBT History Month, which has just ended, Trans Day Visibility, Lesbian Day Visibility, Bi Day Visibility, Leeds Pride. So there's lots of awareness days throughout the year to continue producing content for. And we'd also like to embed early consultation process. So in that critical friend role, we have found that often parts of the council might come to us almost too late in the process of what they're like might be changing, and so our sort of feedback can't always be integrated. It's sort of like it's too late. We can't do that now. So really embedding that early engagement where what we feedback can be embedded into the sort of work that is being done and really taken on board. And we have raised previously, in I think last 2024 scrutiny, that the systems that, in terms of thinking about that representation, there is no capturing of trans identities within our sort of monitoring, in the workforce monitoring. I know that being LGB is not, so it's 3.67% of the council identifies as LGB, and then that's below what the sort of Leeds figure is. So there is work to be done there on that representation, but also the fact that we don't capture trans identities is a real sort of sticking point and a key thing to highlight.
Thank you. Next one is staff networks are carers.
Hi everyone, my name is Louise Sanderson and I'm the co-chair of the Super Families peer group. So I just want to talk about that group first, which is part of the wider carers network for the organisation. So I formed Super Families in 2020 in the middle of COVID, when a lot of SEND families were shielding, and obviously it's an incredibly difficult time for many. So the peer group is specifically for members of staff who've got children of any age with additional needs and long-term medical conditions. We have about 140 members part of our network now, and it still continues to go from strength to strength. We meet on a monthly basis, and we have a mix of guest speakers who attend our sessions. We did a survey last year to ask members directly who they would like to hear from last year. So we have colleagues who attend from Children's and Families. We've got a really good relationship with Health. Leeds Teaching Hospitals come and meet us on a regular basis to talk about all the support that's available in the Trust. We've had charities come along. And also more recently we've been doing some dedicated work with city development colleagues as well, to really feed into sort of accessibility across the city and how our museums, our parks, etc. can be more accessible for SEND families. So that's something we've been particularly sort of proud of in the last 12 months. We're a very supportive network, as you can imagine, provide really valuable support to each other. It can be quite a lonely place as a parent carer, and a lot of parent carers sadly don't work. For our organisation, we are obviously all working parent carers too, and bring a wealth of sort of experience with that too. So I also sit on the Leeds Parent Carer Forum as well. So the Super Families Network has that direct voice into that statutory group, who are obviously working alongside health colleagues and also local authority colleagues too, to try and improve provision across the city for SEND families. So I just want to read a little quote to you all that we had as part of our survey feedback last year from a member. So this says, having this support network helps us all not to feel isolated at work. We can support one another, sometimes to get through a tough day or week or month, and because of this we are able to carry on with our job, enjoy our job and give the best to our job, and even more important, celebrate our wonderful and unique children. So in terms of the wider carers network, we are still reviewing the model. So we've obviously got a really strong and clear strand for children, and we want to look to ideally have a similar strand working alongside that for adults. There's clearly a need across the organisation. We know about 9% of our workforce are carers. Obviously for parent carers it's a lifetime and beyond, whereas for adult caring it perhaps may be a little bit more short or medium term. However, the plan will be to try and get a volunteer adult chair to work alongside Super Families to really take forward the adult strand and work in collaboration with all the corporate stuff that's happening as well around support to carers. Last year, we, as a wider carers network, supported Carers Right Day, we supported Carers Week and had a host of sort of different signposting events as part of that. For Carers' Rights Day in November, which Victoria Eaton, who's our lead CLT member, and John helped us chair, that session, we had over 90 colleagues attend that day to really get more information about what's available in terms of support for working carers across the organisation. There's been some legislation changes last year to do with carers, so we've been helping to raise awareness of that alongside all the support that's available, such as carers passport, etc. So in terms of the next year then, obviously we're really keen to work alongside the Dawn Network to look at the results from the corporate-wide survey which closed recently, and from them we can look at sort of further action planning. It's been mentioned about the fantastic opportunities with My Self-Service and being able to reach to frontline staff that we've not been able to before, so we're really keen to look at how we can do that. And then, like I said, looking at the model around adults as well. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. That nicely leads me to Dawn, actually, now. It's over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Maisie Roberts. I'm here to represent Dawn, the Disability and Wellbeing Network, and I'm currently in the process of stepping down from that role, so I am the outgoing chair. But I can give you a bit of an update on what we've been doing in the past year. And we've made a lot of really good progress in the last year. As Louise mentioned, we launched our Disability Carers and Mental Health Survey, and we've received over 500 responses, which has been really positive. And we felt this was really important because we know disabled people and carers frequently have scored much lower on kind of key indicators in council-wide staff surveys. So we really wanted to go into the detail here and really find out what the lived experiences of our network members are. We've also rebranded our network, created a new logo which incorporates the colours of the Disability Pride flag, and we've created a new hashtag, Without Barriers, Without Limits, which has much more of an emphasis of the social model of disability and kind of really removing those barriers that disabled people face within the organisation. We've also last year launched our Neurodiversity Peer Support Group because we had quite increasing demand from our members who were finding out that they were neurodivergent, and that's had a really positive response, and actually that group has doubled in size since it was founded last year. One area that Dawn is really strong on is that we consult a lot with key stakeholders, internal and external stakeholders on accessibility and disability issues affecting the city. So this year we've worked on key construction, highways and cultural projects and fed into them to really make a difference. But we also know we would be much better if we had much more time and resources to run the network, which we've already talked about today. So as I mentioned before, I'm stepping down as network chair, and we've really struggled to find a replacement despite running a recruitment campaign. And we know that a lot of our network members do struggle to have time off to attend meetings or to have that kind of support from line managers to step forward into those leadership positions. So that definitely is a challenge. Dawn also has quite a heavy caseload, and I think that's because we know that disabled people do face more disadvantage in the workplace. They are often more likely to be going through HR processes and maybe having issues, having reasonable adjustments being put in place. So that is a challenge, and inevitably we have much more kind of requests for support compared to some of the other networks. We know we'd also be much better, I guess, if disabled people face less stigma around their disabled identities, and kind of support around that was much more normalised, with a focus on that kind of social model of disability, of removing those barriers. And linked to what the Race Equality Network shared, we think there could be much more disability visibility within the organisation, better representation at those senior levels, because a lot of our network members do share with us that they do perceive there to be a glass ceiling within the organisation, and they do face barriers in terms of recruitment and career progression. So our priorities looking forward are to really look at the results from the Disability Carers and Mental Health Survey and really put these into action. So we're in the process of analysing the results now, and we really want to work with the organisation to really advocate for a disability strategy that captures those key points, really listens to what our network members have told us, and work together to remove the barriers that disabled people face. So I'm just going to pass over to my colleague, Paul Leahy, who is the acting co-chair, just for some final reflections.
Yeah. Is that on there?
Yeah.
So just a few reflections from me. I think Maisie's really summed it up really well. I think there are some real challenges in terms of to actually running the Disability and Wellbeing Network, because of the complexity of many of the members in terms of what they bring, in terms of the support that they need, and in terms of some of the disadvantage that they perceive within the workplace, which is very real in very many cases. And that's linked to some of the work that the organisation has been tackling in terms of positive action and reasonable adjustments. But I think the organisation needs to probably go further than it currently does in terms of what Maisie said, that the organisation maybe should consider having a disability strategy to actually support disabled people, looking at the issues that really face them across not only things like casework, but also recruitment, in terms of how you actually go and build confidence with disabled people in the community and say that Leeds City Council is a place to come and work. I think we could do much more in terms of that. And that really links with some of the work that I'm also linked with, being a member of the Disability Hub in the city, with the work that Councillor Venner is leading on in Disability Inclusive Leeds, and whether that could actually reflect some of what we do with our workforce as well. In terms of reasonable adjustments, what I'm really clear about is that the positive action framework says that you can treat disabled people more favourably than any other protected characteristic. I think we need to do more work in terms of education of our managers to actually help them understand that reasonable adjustments aren't a nice to have. They are actually something which we have to consider as an organisation, and there is good case law now to actually say that we should be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one is on the list is carers advancement. Rob, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, just for clarity, in my role as the network chair, not as the scrutiny advisor, so just to clarify that. So I will just, my colleague Sam's here as well from the steering group, so I think Sam's going to take a couple of the bullet points as well. So just to run through the slide. So I'm relatively new in this position. I have been involved in the steering group for over a year. So there is a need to relaunch, really refresh and try and develop a more active programme. Previously we did quite a bit of one-to-one support, but I think there's a need to develop a bit further into doing some of the stuff that's been set up by colleagues, a more structured programme to support the network and to provide progression. Many colleagues have just mentioned that for their respective characteristics, protected characteristics, there are issues with progression, so clearly there's a cross-cutting element to the career advancement network that needs to be developed. Some good progress recently is on links with the Stepping Into Management programme, which is a programme run by colleagues in HR, which does share a number of our priorities. It's about facilitating progression for those who wish to step into management, as it says, I suppose, by the name. So there are some clear links there, and I now attend those sessions, and I think that's a positive link up. We're also developing something with Reed Recruitment, which is aimed at interview techniques, CV writing, and interview prep and applications. So hopefully it will be up and running this year. And then Sam, do you want to take the bottom bullet point there?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Just building on the expansion from providing that one-to-one support. We do have a dedicated mailing list which colleagues from across the council do message for inclusion in the network, and also to request any bespoke support that is required. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. That is managed between, we make sure that between us, the members of the steering group, that's got cover to ensure colleagues can, be advised and appropriately. We are also just doing some work at the moment to make sure that network mailing list is as up to date as it can be, which was something we discussed last week at our network meeting. We have also, similar to what colleagues around the room have said, have begun to introduce some quarterly meetings for all network members as a bit of an open and honest discussion forum for their issues, and to try and assist and formulate some ongoing plans for network members. Back to you, Rob.
Thanks, Sam. That's Sam's debut at Scrutiny, isn't it, Sam? So it's career advancement in action right there. Okay, so just lastly, Chair, so the priorities for 25-26, we are doing some stuff with the Aspiring Leaders programme, so that's forthcoming. It's scheduled for June, so that hopefully that'll provide, I guess, through my role, a little bit around decision making and governance arrangements in the council. We're also looking at developing a bit more of a programme on one-to-ones and appraisals to illustrate that it's a joint endeavour between manager and staff member. So prep and how it's important to develop and take advantage of that time with your manager, and important for managers to support progression. I've talked about the sort of stepping into management links, but there's also plans to be more involved in the being your best manager community. And Sam's already mentioned the rebranding, so I think that's it from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I thank the staff network chairs for the presentation and talking us through what fantastic work you have all been doing. Thank you. So at this stage, what I will do is I'll open to the board members for any comments or questions. Councillor Parman first on the list.
Yeah, I just want to echo Councillor Khan's thanks to all the staff network chairs. It's been really, really informative and useful. Got a couple of general points, particular points, but first of all, I'll just say I think councillors might agree with me. We'd like to see you back here a bit more often, because I think it'd be really good. Is it Carol? Carol, I thought that was excellent what you spoke about. What you said to us today will stay with me, and I think you're absolutely spot on. So thank you so much for what you said. And then I've got just a quick point to is it Helen and Lindsay? So thanks so much for what you said. It's an issue that's close to my heart, mental health. I run a men's suicide prevention group. And I was struck by the fact that you're still online. We do face-to-face. We do 2 hours twice a week. Sometimes we don't get, the guys don't turn up. Sometimes we get quite a few. That's the way it is, isn't it? I think going forwards, you need a couple of things. You need a bit of funding. So that would be interesting to see if you can get some funding out of the council, because I think that's essential. Secondly, I think you need a place to meet that's free as well. So I think we need to start a discussion. Where can you meet in a council building that you can just have for a couple of hours once a week with a bit of funding? And also the bottom line, the couple of lines in that bottom paragraph on the second page, we've had feedback from colleagues to say that managers are not giving the allotted time permitted. I'm shocked. Well, maybe it shouldn't be. I'm shocked, but maybe not surprised. But I think we need to address that pretty sharply. If there's anything I can do or our colleagues can do, we'd like to, to help. I'd be more than happy to try and help. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for what everyone's doing. Much appreciated, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parman. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Thank everyone for your report. But the thing that I'm pleased about with your report is you've highlighted the challenges, that the council's got these things in place and they're not perfect. They do need a lot more work going forward. And, that's the bit I'm concentrating on with regards to what needs to happen going forward. It's nice to have all these groups and titles, but lots of challenges still. And time is required. You know, I know you all have a busy workload, and we're holding back on recruitment, so, you know, it's a balancing act at the end of the day. Right. The bit that I would like to pick up is regards to the workplace culture that you highlighted, Carol, in your report. I've also received a couple of letters from people. One is from Active Leeds, which is really upsetting. And in your report, you talked about the delivery success of 2,000 managers. My question is that training still ongoing? Because people leave, change, and we get new one. And to pick up about the workplace in terms of behavior. Well, what I've received is that staff, they're saying, this is from 3 people, that one, staff are suffering badly with mental health issues. And they ask for help and they're being ignored. So I want to know is what, with regards to the policies. They're saying that the policies and procedures, they don't feel they're being followed. And that bullying is rife. Bullying has become norm in the centres. So we've got the Speak Up Guardian. So my question coming on, is the Speak Up Guardian able to go out to centres and other places within the workplace, or do they have to come here to Civic Hall because they feel that their voices are not being heard? And they're saying that they feel isolated and left, and no procedures are followed up with regards to their welfare and concern when they raise any issues. So there's a lot more in it which I won't go through. They've asked me if I could be a voice for them. Well, with regards to all what's taking place, not just with regards to race, but also disability and other issues that they've raised in all these, to say that they don't feel they've been heard. So we've got all these in place, and like I heard, that there's lots more work and challenges to go ahead. And I do believe that we need to ensure that they are acted upon, because if we look after our staff within the workplace, they will look after our residents and customers, or whatever we want, clients that we want to call them, whatever we want to call them, customers, clients, resident, constituents outside, because what the staff portray is feedback onto them. So I know we've got challenges, we know we've got funding, we know etc., but these issues that are coming up needs to be looked at, and especially the policies with regards to the grievance, bullying, etc. And for management, I wouldn't like those, because we've got this big figures, 2,000 being trained. Training shouldn't be a one-off, it's supposed to be ongoing. So that's what I wanted to say about that. That I'm really unhappy and was sad when I received these letters with regards disability, feeling isolated, not being heard, policies and procedures. They went on to say that I need to ask how many grievances are ongoing at this moment in time, because they feel that there's many grievances taking place and people are just ending up leaving because they're not being addressed. There's lots more, but I won't do any more. I'll give others the chance. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say, that, you know, this EDI, it's massive and we need to address as much as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, for those comments and questions. Who's going to pick up? Mariana, and then I'll bring...
Do you want me to start, Chair? Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. I mean, clearly it wouldn't be appropriate to talk about an individual case in a public meeting, but very happy, to pick up afterwards and, through the appropriate channels, etc. Maybe just worth picking up on another couple of points that have been made. And in terms of Be Your Best, I wonder if it would be worth at a future meeting us bringing an update on the Be Your Best programme and what that looks like for, new managers, existing managers. It's fair to say we do have some issues with take-up, and I think that is partly because, as has all been referenced a lot, colleagues are under pressure in services, and there are tensions sometimes between, for example, being able to attend a staff network session and being, delivering, services that, we try and manage and work through to the best of our ability, but that, those challenges are quite real. So I think it's worth, sort of being very aware of that. So happy to pick up separately about the active Leeds case, or a colleague will, but doesn't feel appropriate to pick that up in the room today. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and then I'll bring Helen as well. Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah, just to answer Councillor Hamilton's question on training. Training is ongoing. So the mandatory training that we did for all those managers is not a fixed item. It's always there. So if you're a new manager and just joined, it is mandatory. If you've just been promoted into a managerial role, it is mandatory. So we're delivering that every quarter as a fixed item in our training plan.
Thank you. And Carol? Yeah.
In response to Councillor Hamilton, I just wanted to say that a lot of people approach the network and sort of raise issues with us in the workplace, and we do our best to sort of get in there and promote early resolution. I think when we came 3 years ago, we talked about grievances, and we are not advocates of grievances. Obviously, we know that the organisation has to have a policy, but what we want to do is try and get in quickly as possible to resolve things, to facilitate conversations, because we do think that a lot of things that turn into grievances often could be resolved if the two parties could just be reasonable and have a conversation. And obviously a lot of our demographic do fall within that category. People do feel safe to speak to us, and we do try to help where possible.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Hamilton? Do you have any supplementary question? No? Okay. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I think I had about 4 questions. I'll try and skim through them quickly. The first was just to start off with, there's a lot of attainments in the report, which is quite welcome to read. That there's nothing about the input, though. So what's the global figure that we spend on EDI across all directorates, just to give us a bit of context?
Yes, I can answer that question. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Well, you're actually looking at the EDI team, because there are 3 people opposite me, plus a few more support individuals, although those individuals also undertake other broader HR roles and responsibilities. So in terms of the EDI work we talked about today, it is those 3 individuals.
And the global figure I asked for, so in terms of budget setting, etc., what's the, and there must be budgets attached to training and stuff like that as well. So do we capture, let me put it another way, do we capture the global spend across the council?
We do. I can check that figure for you and provide it, Councillor Stevenson.
Can I just ask a bit about the anonymous shortlisting that's coming in, para 7.3? It's hugely welcome, and any member that's sat on an employment committee of the council or in their professional life as well knows that this is a really good direction of travel. Just on the practicalities of it, there's something that Carol said earlier struck me, because obviously the end goal of this, what we want is a whole system being around meritocracy, that if you've got the ability, you have the same equality of opportunity as anybody else. And what we heard was a lot of people have the ability but aren't getting to the post, and we need to understand why that is. And to some extent, anonymous shortlisting can achieve that. The difficulty is for internal applications, because when you've got an anonymised application, you don't know who the person is, etc. But what you do know is their current role, because it's in the list. And if you have an issue with that person, or you've heard issue or feedback, that's still going to be an obstacle. So my question is going to be, what's the actual process going to look like? What's the anonymised application going to have in it at the shortlisting stage?
And we're still working through that very detail. And I think you're right. It's for internal candidates, it's probably much more difficult because people know people, don't they? And actually, there's lots of also information in the application form that might give it away. So we need to work through what the detail looks like. I think it's in combination with all the other stuff as well. So if you've got a diverse panel, as an example, where somebody's come from an entirely different service to help the check and challenge of the selection and recruitment wider process, that helps as well. But that's the detail of what that will look like. We're yet to work through it. What we do know is we need to bring it in because we know it actually makes a difference.
And a supplementary on that one, what we currently have, I can't remember the proper name for it, but we currently have a system in place, Andy might be able to help me out here, that when you're shortlisting, if somebody says there's a protected characteristic, I think a disability is the one that springs to mind, they automatically get into the interview stage, don't they? Is that therefore going to be removed once we do anonymous shortlisting? Because and if not, why not? Because if it's anonymous, the point should be it shouldn't really matter. They're being assessed on their skills and qualifications.
No, the job interview guarantee scheme will remain, and that allows people who've declared a disability and they've met the essential criteria, right, to have a guaranteed interview. We're not proposing to change that. I think that's a good thing. I think it's part of what's helping us get people to apply confidently if you have a disability. So we're not proposing to change that at all.
Let's move on to my last point, Chair. On paragraph 5.1, there's the outcomes that have been achieved in the last, I think it's the last, well, up to now. Later on, it talks about positive action. I wondered what, I think this is at paragraph 8.1. It talks about targeting specific groups for recruitment. So in practice, what does that look like? The actual targeting of specific groups. It's on the graph on page 77.
Okay, Councillor, in terms of positive action, in terms of targeting, what it really means is that we look at service by service to actually see where the gaps may be in terms of representation, because what we want to be is more representative of the communities that we are seeking to serve. So we want our workforce to reflect more clearly the communities that we are trying to serve. So it's about looking at those gaps and addressing that in terms of representation.
I think what would be really useful is for us to see those figures at paragraph 5.2, to see them by department and by service perhaps, and by tier in the authority, because I started reading this paper a week ago when it came out. My first assessment, looking at the data and the achievements you've made, is that what this council really needs today by recruitment is more heterosexual males who have a religious belief and a disability and are ethnically diverse. That's what the data tells us holistically. Now, to follow that on, if we're talking about positive action, one would expect targeting of being those groups. Now, in reality, I think what it's saying is that when you start to break it down by tier or sector, that's where you want to bring in your positive action, because those figures are not the same per department and in per service. So it'd be really useful for us to see how that breaks down, to see, and it links to the progression, is that gap wider as you go further up the authority?
in terms of data, you're absolutely right, Councillor, that it's important to look at service and different groups within the organisation. And I think the really important point to make is that for positive action to be lawful, that is why we have to look and go to the data to make sure that we are addressing underrepresentation and disadvantage, because if we are not, then we are straying into positive discrimination.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Yes, thank you. I guess just to add to Paul's comment, I think you are right that the data is important, but the granularity of the data is equally important. And one of the big developments that we have focused on over the last year or so is the diversity dashboard. So managers can now drill down to actually look at the impact in their own workforce of their own demographic, but also more recently focus as well as about long-term trends as well. So only, I think last week we were sharing some information with the Race Equality Staff Network looking at 10-year trends, in particular bits of the organisation, but also, as you rightly say, different tiers of the organisation too. And that's a really rich data. So we are making some really good progress on that. So although that report does give the aggregated, probably the more detailed analysis is useful. But just to add on, colleagues also mentioned the importance of benchmarking too, and we're very mindful of that. And also colleagues have also mentioned about the benefit of my self-service. So getting access to the data, an individual actually declaring their protected characteristics and their own personal data is really important. And for the first time, we'll be able to do that more holistically across the organisation.
Thank you, Andy. Victoria, do you want to comment on Councillor Stevens' first question?
Just on the global costs, we can provide the direct costs, but there are obviously a number of costs that are incurred around staff participating in the groups and the champions, etc., which we won't be able to quantify, but we can give you the global cost of the direct teams. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be quick. So it's really encouraging to see the cross-cutting work between the networks, especially on career advancement. I was going to ask about it, but Rob beat me to it. So just one question. What can we as elected members do to support the staff networks so that we can support you to embed that change and make it last and be really effective? Thank you.
That's the million-dollar question. I don't think there is a silver bullet, and I think everyone in this room will acknowledge it. I think that for staff networks, and I think the thing that's come through all of us have said about this, there is a sort of well-understood issue that Mariana's also just alluded to as well, is capacity versus intention of what we want to do as an organisation. And as an organisation, we are ambitious in terms of what we deliver to the people of Leeds, but also in terms of what we deliver to staff. And I guess that some of that comes down into, I guess, from my perspective, into some of the decision-making, because all of the asks, nobody is, in terms of the things that we do, nobody is in disagreement about the things we do, but the timelines to do that and the capacity to do that is always where the real struggle happens for a lot of us. You know, to the other point as well about how much it costs us. Staff Network Leeds get protected time, but it does not actually mean that our time is taken away. Like, I still do my job, and that time is not lessened. My capacity remains that way, and all of the chairs have regularly we've talked about that and articulated that last year as well. So there is a hidden cost of that as well. So I guess for me the conversation is always about that, the big picture about things, then what does that look like in the fine detail of how much that actually puts the pressure on a diminishing workforce who want to be better and need the capacity and the space in order to do that.
Thank you. Before I close this item, can I ask Councillor Cooper to have a final comment on this item, please?
Thank you, Chair, for bringing me in. And I just want to say a huge thank you to all of your staff networks. And I know that the chairs are here today. And I think that's testimony to the way that we work collaboratively, really, in this organisation. I think today demonstrates how open and transparent we are as an organisation in terms of looking inwards and checking and challenging and testing what we're doing. I think it's been excellent to hear you all today with your achievements, but that we've seen over a number of years now, and I'm really pleased to see that, because I can remember the day that we weren't achieving some of these things, and you came to Scrutiny and highlighted all of that. So actually today to see we've got some traction, we are making some progress in it. Still a lot to do, and I acknowledge there's still a lot to do in terms of that work. But I think we can see as an organisation how committed we are to this, and we're committed to getting there together with all of our staff, all 14,000 of our staff. And you're here today to speak up for those people who have those protected characteristics, who experience, in this council is not always what it should be. And I think we absolutely recognise that, and we want to change that for the better. So we'll continue to work together, and you've heard from elected member colleagues today how proud they are of the staff that work for Leeds City Council and the networks as well, and how they want to support and help in any way as well with that. And I absolutely, there is a volunteer element to this as well, that that we can't value. There isn't a cost driven from that actually, because all of you, although you do get some time to do work on the network, there are far more hours done in terms of the voluntary work that backs all that up for you. So I think we have to recognise that as well. It's not all just in money terms, it's in your time and your volunteer time as well, and also the people that you work with in your networks. So huge heartfelt thank you. It really matters. What you're doing is making a change. You're making a difference to the people who work for this council. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Just following from your comments, I just want to say we are, clearly you're all doing some positive work in this area, and it is really important that all our workforce is supported, feel valued, and are able to progress. While working for the council, and however we working to ensure our workforce is representative of the city we live, and on behalf of the board, and we just want to say thank you for what fantastic work you all been doing, and thank you once again. So thank you everyone. So before we move to the recommendation on page 72, Rob, you captured all the comments. Do you want just to highlight the recommendation before I put to the board members? Yes, statement, and we'll continue on this EDI.
Yeah, yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, you're right. I have made notes of all the discussion today. The last year the board did a scrutiny statement, which ultimately found its way to executive board. So, Chair, I think you're referring to potentially updating that, if the board was agreeable to that, to pick up discussion today.
Are board members happy with the recommendation that's been just? Yep. Thank you. Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 9, which is a report from the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. Leeds is the first local authority to appoint a Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, and the role has really helped the council to ensure we are listening to staff and the highest level. It also shows that we are committed to learn as an organisation to make sure that we are responsive and we can react to issues as they arise. While there are issues to deal with, and it is important to listen to and respond to the issue raised by colleagues, it is also important to note that this reflects a small number of staff, and that our large majority of staff, they are well supported and able to have fulfilling role working for the council. We have a presentation to support this item. So Vanessa, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, should I say. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to canter through the presentation. There is nothing in the presentation that isn't in the report. So, you know, I don't want to take up too much of the time today with duplication, but I do want to just say thank you to everybody in the room and thank you to the Chair for inviting me to speak today. One thing to know is that freedom to speak up is a lot more than EDI. I've obviously been asked to come here today to do an EDI-facing report and to talk about some of the EDI benefits that freedom to speak up can bring and how it's highlighted some of the challenges in that area. I also want to say that freedom to speak up in this organisation has got off to a really, really good start, probably better than what I could have ever hoped for, delving into the unknown as being the first guardian in a local authority, and that has really been supported by the staff networks, by the HROD team, by Mariana, by Andy, by internal audit, also by our outgoing Chief Exec, Tom Reardon, and our incoming Chief Exec, Ed Whiting. So you can see the numbers there. I've just lifted them from the report. I'm not going to go over them too much, but what I can see is there's a fairly consistent number coming through to me. I am one person, and although I am many wonderful things, I am still only one person in terms of the numbers that are coming through to me. So they may seem small in comparison to our organisation, but it is still important. It's important to capture and hear those voices. In terms of translation rate, so that's the rate between people contacting me to talk to me about a lived experience and that then going on to be raised to the organisation, so people having that psychological safety and that confidence to raise it either anonymously, confidentially or openly to the organisation through myself. We're looking at around 60 to 70%. It does fluctuate, and you'll note from the data there, Q4 last year did see a slight drop in that figure. I think it was around 53%. There's lots of different things that contribute to somebody then going on to raise their concern or their suggestion to the organisation. Lots of things that contribute to attrition. I've not done any hard nailed-on analysis on this, but I would suspect there was a lot of uncertainty in the organisation towards the end of last year, particularly from sort of Mariana doing her really key, wonderful role as interim chief exec and Ed coming in, and a lot of messaging around the financial challenge and what that might mean for people's positions and jobs, and all that kind of thing does play into psychological safety. So I'm really glad that when Ed came in, he was, you know, really good at supporting freedom to speak up very publicly right from the off. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Rob. Wonderful. So in terms of speaking up themes, and again, this is all in the report, more generally what I'm seeing is people speaking up about experiences of them or others not being treated fairly, or their perception of not being treated fairly by the organisation. And that spans a really wide range of things, right from I don't think it's fair how we distribute Christmas holiday in our team, you know, all the way through to, you know, I feel like I'm getting an unfair workload and this may start to impact my mental health and well-being. Leading on from that as well, the next sort of most prevalent theme was around worker well-being, and this was mainly around either workload, and we've all talked quite candidly today around some of the challenges we face in our council about doing more with a lot less. And also around interpersonal relationships with other colleagues as well, so colleague disagreements. There has also, to echo what some of the staff networks have said as well, some of that geopolitical and local issues coming through, maybe not quite as strongly to me as has been to the staff networks. I think that's been more of a collective thing, but I have heard you know, a few voices around that, that link through. Moving on to EDI-related themes, I suppose looking across sort of the 9 protected characteristics and also care leavers as well, which we do, you know, we do also recognise as a protected characteristic. The two kind of most prevalent of those protected characteristics that are coming through to me are around lived experiences of racial discrimination and also lived experiences of disability discrimination, all really echoing what our staff networks have said today. I don't think there's anything new to add to that. So you've got things like sort of colleague to colleague and racism and experiencing racism from members of the public or children and family that we work with, microaggressions as well, and people having that cultural awareness and that knowledge around recognising some of those things. So when our colleagues do speak up about them and say, this is happening to me, our managers understand and can therefore act on it. There's been some commentary around feeling marginalised as well, and people feeling that this is very much linked to their ethnicity or their cultural background. And again, as our Race Equality Staff Network have pointed out, challenges around recruitment and career progression, and really not feeling from our ethnically diverse staff that this is something that they are achieving. Next slide, please. In terms of our disability discrimination theme and also long-term health condition theme, so colleagues' lived experience of working for the organisation is someone who has a disability or long-term health condition. At the top of the list again there is reasonable adjustments, and I know we've talked quite a lot about that today, so managers understanding reasonable adjustments, not just because it's nice to do, but actually there is a legal responsibility. And in terms of some of the attitudes and approaches I'm hearing through lived experience is that equality versus equity, so people understanding that actually reasonable adjustments aren't an extra benefit or a perk that somebody gets. It's about recognising that people, because of their disability or their health condition or other protected characteristics, so that intersectionality as well, they are starting from different places. So it's about equity in terms of giving people what we need so we can level the playing field. It's not about giving somebody a leg up or a foot up just because they've got a disability. And again, inconsistent approaches to inclusive recruitment practices. So some very, very practical things around interview activities, perhaps not being accessible to everybody. I am really pleased to say there's been a lot of good work in both the racial discrimination and disability discrimination areas, particularly from the HROD team, and I work really closely with John on a lot of that. I know we've had a lot of conversations about reasonable adjustments, so I'm really pleased to see that training is underway, and the stuff around diverse recruitment panels and the EDI Be Your Best training as well. Next slide, please. So in terms, again, it's all in the report. I'm not going to go over this too much in the interest of time, but, you know, my job isn't necessarily to get people what they want. My job is to listen to what somebody has said, is to capture that in a really independent and impartial way and raise that to the organisation and ask the organisation to respond to that. How the organisation responds is entirely up to them, but what I would always advocate for is a restorative and relational approach, so sitting down around the table, that early resolution work, because when people don't feel heard and they don't feel valued, what tends to happen is people tend to escalate or they leave. And we can lose a lot of good colleagues, you know, in that way. And either way, it can really impact people's mental health and well-being. So in terms of listening up with cautious curiosity, this is a really interesting one. Freedom to speak up invites me to speak truth to power. And within that, there can be some uncomfortable or maybe unpalatable messages for senior leaders and managers to hear, but it is important that we do hear them. It's important that we do hear the challenges. There have been some instances of where it's really been quite difficult for people to hear somebody's lived experience that perhaps is so different to their own of the organisation. And I think where people feel that what somebody is saying is perhaps an anomaly, I would invite them to lean into that with cautious curiosity, so more of the trying to understand why their experience is what it is, rather than kind of dismissing it without any kind of objective merit in that. Next slide, please. So in terms of effective listening up, I think we've all kind of touched on this really. So this kind of comes from over the sort of a few years I've been in post, having a small but consistent stream of colleagues who have come to me who are already in formal grievance processes with the organisation, but have come to me to speak up, not to resolve their grievance, so not to resolve why they're in that process, but about their experience of their process, so in terms of length of time, approaches and methodologies in hearing the grievance, skills and understanding of investigating officers as well, including awareness of EDI-specific issues and that ability to really understand that lived experience, as well as communication and updates. There are lots of challenges and lots of sort of reasons why this may take place, particularly around the length of time it takes us to hear some grievances. I do know, again, we're all doing a lot more with a lot less, the capacity being one, but it is also important to note that this doesn't all sit with HR. There's a certain level of autonomy and responsibility we give to our services to navigate formal grievance processes as well. So, like I say, it is all in there in the report. I'd be quite happy to work with whoever in terms of HR at looking at that specific issue. Next slide, please. In terms of follow-up, so I know I've said some really hard messages there and some really challenging things, but actually we are off to a really good start. I am part of the Regional Guardians Network, and we meet quite regularly, so colleagues in the NHS and in the care sector, and a lot of their kind of lived experiences of being a guardian. Sometimes I do sit there and I think, ooh, I don't get that. I'm quite lucky, you know. So I think in terms of how we've really made that start, it's been wonderful to see. There are pockets of really good practice around the table. I'm just going to point out one, just because she sat down the end there, Louise Sanderson, in terms of her role as head of BAS, really good at looking at practical and restorative early resolution ways for her service to talk through any concerns that they may have. I've also got the Let's Talk Speaking Up training, as well as part of the Be Your Best programme. I launched that in October for Freedom to Speak Up month. We've only had a couple of those sessions because they do run quarterly, but feedback so far has been really well received. It's given managers a lot to think about how they navigate any kind of concerns and how they recognise when people are speaking up, because I think sometimes managers can take it as people having a bit of a moan, whereas actually what they're doing is they're speaking up, and it can really invite you to have that conversation. So I think I will leave it there because everything else is in the report. Is that all right?
Thank you, Vanessa, for the report. At this stage, I will open to board members for any comments or questions. Yes, Councillor Stevenson first, and then.
Thank you, Chair. When I read this, my first question previously is what budget's attached to this, but I think Vanessa mentioned you're the only person, so it'll probably be inappropriate to answer that. But could the request therefore be that, but members do need to know it, so confidentially and privately afterwards, can please the budget line be circulated? Because I think it's really important when we're as scrutiny board members, when we're asked to assess the outcomes we're being given, we need to know what we're assessing that against, both financially and sort of the more culture practice as well. That would be really helpful. And so the question beyond that was going to be, first of all, on the figures you gave us, Vanessa, on page 99, are they individual contacts, or will some of them be from the same people multiple times?
No, some of them will be from the same people multiple times. So the National Guardian's Office asks us to count how many times we have been contacted, not necessarily how many individual people have come to us.
So we're talking about 14,000 people in the workplace, and in last year it was 84 people made contact, but that's effectively could have been like 4 people 10 times, 20 times, whatever, couldn't it, along the way? But yeah, I think I'm mindful of the first bit on the report, which is what we ask of you, Vanessa, which is to challenge appropriately and look for opportunities. So I'll try and echo that same sentiment, in that, and my admission is I had never heard of this role before this report came out. That's entirely my fault, but it's a welcome role. I think some other members are nodding along as well, and that led my sort of professional curiosity. In the last week, I've spoken to 19 council officers in my work as elected member, including this morning when I ran around most of the offices in Civic Hall. My single question was, do you know who the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian is and how do I contact them? 18 said never heard of it. 1 said, I'm not sure, and then said, oh, it's a really friendly lady that comes in through reception. So I think my question would be, for the year ahead, what are we going to be doing more of to make sure that, and it may be a question for senior officers actually, that what are we going to do more of to ensure that the staff body network is aware of their rights to contact and the work that's being done, so that next year, hopefully the report shows either more contacts made or more resolutions made.
Thank you, Councillor. So there's lots of different things. I'm really surprised that some councils haven't heard of me. I have done some elected member sessions that I know some of you have attended. I've done that since I started back in June 2022. So if you're unsure, please do book on. I think there'll be a yearly feature. I would absolutely welcome you all. In terms of reach of the organisation, we are a large organisation and I am one person. There is a programme of work and engagement. And that is made up of 2 things really. some triangulation of data from HR and other areas around where we may see hotspots. So, for example, active Leeds. You know, in terms of going out physically and going to those areas and sort of popping me up and saying, hi, I'm your friendly Freedom to Speak Up guardian. So in the past year, I did highways. So we did 150 frontline staff that we brought in. I've also been around children's residential. I've been around a number of the... Sorry? Yeah, parks and countryside events as well, or climate energy green spaces. Some of the BAS teams as well. So the issue with coming out and doing that active promotion is that I also get back a lot of work from that. So we kind of have to pace that with, yes, everybody should know about me. Yes, I should be really, really accessible. But also what we don't want is for people to be contacting me and not getting that good service that they talk about. A lot of my the colleagues that contact me say, you know, it's really good that I have somebody to talk to. It's really good that you do wellbeing check-ins along my speaking up journey. You're the first person that I've come to that's really listened and heard what I've said and captured it in a really good way. So we don't want to compromise on the quality of the service that I am providing. So I'm very, very mindful of that. But there is a programme of works and engagement across the organisation. Sometimes I have to pivot that if, you know, we're hearing certain things from certain areas just to make sure that people know about me. I also think the new HR self-serve programme will help with that, because that will mean that we can get across the digital divide in terms of messages. I also do quite a lot of comms with Ed in terms of our extended BCLT cohort as well. So it's a balancing exercise, but I appreciate some people won't know about me yet.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Stevenson, before I bring Mariana, when you said member were nodding their head, but there was nodding opposite. So they have heard the Speak Up Guardian anyway. So, Mariana?
Yeah, just to support what Vanessa said, I mean, we have, you know, pushed the role to try and help people understand it, because it is a different role. As we say, we are the first council to do it, and we've drawn a lot from the NHS. But I guess, like with all our comms, it is difficult to reach all 14,000 people and for people to remember. But we will certainly continue that both with officers and with members, and, you know, run the annual session with members so that everybody does understand it.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to what colleagues have said as well, that actually Vanessa and the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian is, as she said, she is just one person, and that is just one route that we have for staff to make contact in this organisation about potential issues and concerns that they may have that they want to raise, either through their line management, through HR processes, through all the networks here that we've got that actually they also can raise those issues, and the people that are not in the room are the trade unions that also take up people's concerns and issues throughout the organisation as well. So there are many routes to come through, not just Vanessa in the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, although what a fantastic job I have to say that she does, you know, in that respect. And I'm really proud, actually, that we've decided, you know, as a council, to try to do this, to have a Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, to have another route for staff to come in and speak to us, you know, and let us know how they're feeling, and they can do it, you know, in an anonymous way through Vanessa as well, if they, you know, need to do that. You know, so there are many ways that staff can come through to us, and Vanessa's, you know, one of those routes that we're talking about today.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Next on the list is Councillor Hinchcliffe, please.
Thanks, Chair. And agree with Councillor Cooper. I was about to ask about trade unions, but you beat me to it. So, quick question for Vanessa on the figures. I think it's well explained in the report, but you mentioned the networks. Do you ever compare figures in terms of percentages of people that do choose to speak up in the NHS or any other organisations that use this?
Thank you, Councillor. So are you asking, do I compare figures in terms of the types of concerns or people that are coming to me across the National Guardians network or across our internal staff networks?
No, just literally just the numbers, the amount of people from different organisations that come and speak. Obviously, organisations different sizes, so maybe percentages.
Not necessarily. So in terms of National Guardians Office, the way it works for our NHS-based guardians is they do a report to board every year, and I believe that is published. I don't necessarily, in terms of the Regional Guardians Office, do any kind of benchmarking in terms of similar sized organisations. Perhaps that's something I can look into. But I don't currently do that. But in terms of an anecdotal feel, when I go to sort of the regional networks and we talk about capacity, we talk about how busy we are, I do get a sense that I'm probably just as busy as some of our guardians in our local NHS trusts.
That's fine, thank you. Just on benchmarking, that would be a good exercise to do. It is helpful for members on basically everything else, but obviously we don't want to stretch any more capacity, giving you just one person, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Hinchcliffe. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. I think my question's been answered, but I was just going to say I'm surprised Councillor Stevenson hasn't heard of the Speak Up Guardian. We've had online for all councillors, and we've also had your presentation in the banqueting suite twice. So where have you been? But you answered my question already.
Chair, if I just may, the point I made earlier was that of 20 people, it was a small cohort, but of course it was a quarter of the people that have contacted you. On 20 people I've spoken to, that's the bigger concern for me, the workforce and how they are. I presume, are you open to elected members contacting you as well? Is that a route that members can?
So at the moment, freedom to speak up remains for officers. If there are any kind of concerns that elected members have, I think there's their own mechanisms there, isn't there? The elected members' guidance around that, but it is open to just officers at the minute as a route to speak up.
Briefly, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, just coming back with regards to, I did ask, were you just based here or did you go to other places where people can see you rather than just coming here to have a chat with you? That was one of the other questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, absolutely. I have been to different sites. I meet people in cafes, wherever feels safe and appropriate for them. I'm quite happy to come to people. Doesn't have to be, because the psychological safety around getting called into civic hall to speak up or to share your lived experience can be actually quite counterintuitive to what we're trying to achieve. So I'm flexible. I will go wherever feels safe and appropriate for that person.
Thank you. Next on the list is Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Two questions, Vanessa. One's specific. It was about the response rate, 87%. What does that actually mean? It surely doesn't mean 13% of managers don't respond to you, does it? The target, I think, is 90%. And you think, I think on the slides you talked about the chief executive, CX being the chief executive presumably, looking for a 90% return rate, but in the main body it talks about him asking directors for a 95, 94, 95, 96% response rate, and I just wonder why it wasn't 100%. That's the first one. The second one's a more general one, which you'll be more familiar with. I'm a very strong supporter of The Guardian and whistleblowing more generally, as you know. But any organisation is only as strong as its weakest link, which is usually human. In the body of the report, you talked about a number of managers not being quite as responsive as maybe they should be, and we've heard that from all of the staff networks down below. So it's obviously a sort of fairly common problem. And coming out of that, and this is the one I've asked you before, and Debbie and Mariana as well. Although you're independent, you are actually employed by the council and your immediate superiors and Caroline Barrier and so on and so forth, are also employed or work for the council. How do you know how effective the Guardian role is and the whistleblowing policy within the council without an independent sort of oversight? if there's an answer to that. Thank you.
Vanessa?
Thank you, Councillor Flynn, and thank you for your continued support. I know we've had a few chats, haven't we, along the way, and actually I always come away from them with new ideas and feeling, I'm feeling quite supported and reinvigorated. So I want to thank you for your continued support. I know this is a topic that is close to your heart. In terms of why not 100%, I think there's a practicality around here, around why not 100%. So number one, the figures I've taken are a snapshot of figures in time. There will be some cases that will have only been open for 2 days when I took that figure. There'll be others that may have been open for a little bit of a longer time. So it's a snapshot in time. In terms of the response rate and what does that mean? So like I've said earlier, in my time here at Scrutiny, how the organisation responds is entirely up to them. For most speaking up concerns that come across my desk, the most appropriate thing to do would be to arrange a time if it feels safe and appropriate for that person to sit down, discuss the concern, try and get to a resolution. So coming back to the early resolution and restorative route. Sometimes it might be a letter or an email through me back to that person or directly to that person if they feel comfortable with whoever we're sharing the concern to know who they are. Sometimes it might be more general. So I might be hearing a lot of noise about a particular change in a service or model that's happened. And actually that leads leaders to conclude what we need to do is get out there and do a bit more training with that specific team. So the organisation's gift is in its response. But what I'm looking for is that some sort of action and response has been taken to let that person at least know that their voice has been heard, and if there's any positive change needed, that's what they're going to do, and if not, why not in terms of that basic rationale. In terms of the disparity around those figures, I'm quite ambitious. I think we've talked about us being an ambitious council, but I also realise that this is a stepped approach. I think if we go in too hard and too high, we might be setting ourselves up for a bit of failure there. So actually, absolutely, the goal for me, the dream would be a response rate of sort of 96, 95, 96. I think if we eke it up to 90 over the next maybe year and a half and see where we get to, that would be really good. And in terms of the last point around response rates, some of the colleagues who come to me, the casework around what they're speaking up about is really, really complex. And quite rightly so, because we want to do that speaking up justice. It can take us a little bit of a while to get underneath the skin and look at how we can resolve things.
Thank you. Before I bring Councillor Blackburn in, Vanessa, page 101, paragraph 20, senior leadership involvement. This is positive. How do we make this normal practice? Are there challenges around available time to deal with the issues?
I think in terms of senior leadership involvement, it has been really, really positive. So the model that I currently follow around speaking up is that all directors and the chief executive receives every single speaking up concern. So that helps give it more visibility, I would say. I think in terms of the challenges of looking at concerns, it's like everything else that we've talked about here today. This is stuff that you need to do if you want to look after your staff, if you want your staff to feel valued. And there's always other pressures in time. There's always other things that we need to be doing. But fundamentally, if we can help support our staff to feel valued and to live out our council values and behaviours of giving our staff a voice and listening to what they say, that will go a long way in terms of staff commitment back to us. So I think, in terms of the relationship with senior leaders, it's been really, really good, really, really positive.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn, you've got a brief supplementary, then I'll bring Councillor Blackburn as well.
The question will be brief. I don't know if the answer will be. Thanks, Oscar. Vanessa, just following on from the response rates, I accept the point that some issues will be very complex and difficult to resolve, but I would think they'd be exceptional. And in most organisations, there is a time, reply by 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, and all the rest of it. Why not insist on it? And if you don't get it, you can go straight to the chief executive.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. I do.
Councillor Blackburn.
I've got to say, I think you do a wonderful job, but I do have some concerns that there's somebody out there working on the own or in the small team as actually say. I mean, you've got your figures here, but are you looking at where you're getting those inquiries from and making sure you're contacting parts of the organisation that don't seem to be contacting you?
Absolutely, yes. I think the push and pull factor is every time I pop my head up, I get a wave of work back, which is really, really good, really, really positive. But like I've said, in terms of that service, that quality of service that people get back from me, I want to make sure that that is continued, because that trusting relationship is so important. But yeah, I do a lot of triangulation work, because for me, silence in an organisation is a bit like a naughty toddler. For those of you who've had kids at home, you never quite know what they're doing until you kind of pop your head in the door, do you? And the next thing you know, you've got your toilet roll all over the floor, haven't you? So for me, silence isn't golden. Silence is a bit of a curiosity marker, so I do use other data to triangulate what may be going on there, but I do have to also pace myself so I don't burn out and I can be here for the staff.
Councillor Timmins.
Thank you, Vanessa. And it's clear from what you've said and from the staff networks that actually we're doing a good job as an organisation. We're open, set these things up, but we've got work to do in certain areas, and it's important that we do tackle that. Just to maybe come back off further Councillor Stevenson's point. So I wasn't around when it was first launched. I wasn't elected then, so I don't know where that went about. But in terms of ongoing awareness for council officers, you know, how is it advertised? For example, you know, do we have posters up in all our buildings? You know, Newmarket House here, you know, in the toilets, things like that. Like in the loos, for example, here, you've got these counselling posters with little tabs that you can rip off, for example. You know, and I always see them ripped off, and it's a perfect place for people to read stuff, in the offices as well. You know, could we encourage managers, line managers, department managers, could we do like a signature, a banner for signature that people could pop on their emails, for example? And it would also maybe be a good idea, you know, if we could embed Speak Up Guardian as part of the induction process for new councillors as well.
Thank you, Councillor. So you have just talked about 2 or 3 things that are on my comms and engagement wish list. So they're things that I will be getting on with. In terms of new people coming into the organisation, I do go to that session. So I'm invited to every single session and I do speak. On the odd occasion that I can't attend, I have a video on Insight that plays that shows my, it talks about me, my role and how to contact me. In terms of the very physical things around sticking posters up and things like that, I think it's a bit of a discussion that Mariana and I had really early on around the practicalities of that, something I'm happy to revisit. But actually what I've found to be slightly more effective is trying to get out and show my face around the place, really heavily on Insight, doing some advertising. So I do that from time to time, particularly around Freedom to Speak at month, but also incrementally throughout the year as well. At any events that I go to, I do often have a QR code on a stand as well that people can, you know, kind of zap their phone to, and that takes them straight to the contact form for me, or takes them to the video of me talking as well. So there's lots of different ways around comms and engagement. But yeah, you have talked about some of my wish list stuff, and I think some of that has some, you know, budgetary consequences attached to that as well. So it would be around looking at doing that in the most effective and efficient way.
Thank you, Vanessa, and I think it's been very productive discussion been taking place this morning, and that brings me to end of this discussion. Before I close this item, I'm going to ask Andy or Mariana or Councillor Cooper to make final comment before we go to recommendation.
I think the only thing I would add, Chair, just to what Vanessa said, is one thing I think that has worked quite well is, you know, we've raised a lot of awareness, particularly among senior colleagues, and then for Vanessa to be invited to all staff sessions, or so that it's actually a part and parcel of, you know, what's being delivered in relation to other service developments, as well as, you know, just individual communications. So, and I think, you know, in summing up, you know, it's like on EDI more broadly, we are making a lot of progress, and there's a lot that we're really proud of in terms of our organisational culture. But we also know there's a lot more to do to make sure that everybody's day-to-day lived experience is where we would want it to be. And, you know, it's good that we kind of hold ourselves to account through this annual session with Scrutiny, as well as, you know, other areas where we're held to account as well.
Councillor Cooper, do you want to make? Yeah, that's fine, no problem. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And are we, Rob, do you want to just conclude the recommendation, and I'll put it out to the board members for approval?
Yes, Chair. So just, I think the discussion that took place in the pre-meeting around the grievance practice review, just to formalise that under this item. So through you, Chair, that to be programmed in for the next municipal year.
Are members happy with the recommendation? Yep. On page 97. Yep. Thank you. We now move on to the last agenda item, which is the work programme. Guests are welcome to stay if you want. Otherwise, thank you for attending this morning. And I'll hand over to Rob for the work programme.
Thanks, Councillor Khan. Yes, conscious we've been in a long session, so relatively briefly then. Just to note formally that the meeting date changed to the 28th of April, so our next meeting will be the 28th of April, Chair, as you know. There are a couple of other adjustments, one reflecting the planned pre-decision work on the people strategy. That will come early in the new municipal year, as will the board's interest in the employee pay date changes. So they've both been delayed slightly, just to reflect that in the public session. And then just what I just said then around the grievance practice review, that's another item to be developed through the work programme discussion between you and I, Chair. Okay, thank you.
Board members, any comments or questions? Nope, happy to. Oh, Councillor Flynn.
Just a very quick one. Sell, the council catering sort of contracts, etc., is down in December. Given that they've lost a lot of money over the last 3 years, I wonder if you could look at it earlier in the year as well.
The civic enterprise lead stuff, yeah. So yeah, the item in December. So actually, Councillor Khan has got an update briefing on it in the coming weeks, so that will inform that. To be picked up in work programming, but yes, if that's a desire of the board, yes, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of today's business. Thank you for attendance and your contribution today. Our next meeting is scheduled, as Rob says, Monday, 28th of April at 10:30 a.m. As usual, pre-meeting will start at 10 a.m. Thank you.